Then I would suggest that we are starting.
Freshly shaved.
Ah, okay.
Freshly shaved.
Yeah, perfect. So we are ready to go. So we are also broadcasting, that just that everybody is aware. We push the button, and for every participants who are not able to join, there will be a recorded session. Or people who cannot hear us, I prepared also small slide. Usually I click here and with instructions in case something is not working correctly. I got instructions from the provider. In case there are issues, please use a Chrome or Firefox. Then check your browser is up to date, update to the newest version. Clear your cache and cookies in order to allow also pop-ups. Allow the website to access your microphone and audio. If you're on Wi-Fi, switch to a LAN connection. Actually, this is what I'm doing, and it helps very much. Even nowadays, with everybody using Wi-Fi, I must admit the LAN connection is much more stable. Keep the programs running on your computer to a minimum. I switched out Outlook, so there should be no interruptions anymore. Good, then I would suggest we are ready to start. Welcome to the second virtual coffee talk. We are today talking about business data migration. I call it setting the foundations, and this time I use the story of building houses, construction sites. So this you will see in the pictures throughout the presentation. Maybe for everybody who is new, my name is Kerstin Lehmann. I initiated these talks by having before company updates, and then I thought maybe it would be interested also for a wider group of people to open up. So this is the second time we're doing this, and we are also doing 2 more sessions in June, and then we will see how it went, and then maybe start another series in autumn. So what we are doing today, today we have business data migration. The session is divided in 2 parts. The first part will be more a theoretical introduction with key messages around my story, then the key messages. I come to the conclusion then, and then we're going to the stories, and now we're coming to my guest speakers. For today, I invited Sarah and Miro. Sarah is a good colleague of mine, having also her own company, working in core banking migrations, I'm pretty sure since 25 years, something around that. I value Sarah's expertise, especially as architect. I can highly recommend her. I'm more the project manager, and I need usually people like Sarah who have the deep business knowledge and can have deep discussions with clients. Then we have Miro. It's a partner colleague of mine from OnPoint. He is a migration expert, but more from a technical side, where I'm more the general business manager. But he has a technical expertise from a background and also expert in core banking migrations. Then we have Caro, who joined us also last week as a moderator. This is because every participant is on mute. You're not able to speak, but you can post questions and comments via the chat. So Caro will observe the chat and see if there are questions, and if there's anything urgent, she will interrupt me and later on post also the question during our second part of the discussion. So that's a little bit our program for today. So for the theoretical part, I asked my colleagues to go on mute, and I will also then focus on the slides. So my story, business data migration. Usually people are just hearing data migration and are thinking about theoretical migration from the left side to the right side. I call it business data migration because I believe there's also a strong part of business involved and required in order to ensure that data is migrated completely and correctly. And I have here collected 3 examples where I had some experiences where it was not so well done. So my first example is a client where we have not planned in any business data migration activities and poorly concentrated on the technical data migration, and then come to the conclusion, who's verifying that the data is correct? So there was a strong assumption that business is doing it somehow without any orchestration, without any planning, it just confirming the data is correct. Of course, this is not really working. And then we had some last minute exercises in order to get business involved. My lessons learned there is get business on board right from the start. Then the second example is ensuring data quality. Data quality is also not coming automatically. I had a project where we used 24 monthly migration runs until we came to data which was of a quality which we could use for cutover and going live. So my conclusion there was ensure data quality is on your critical path by definition. So you need time in order to ensure data quality. Because the third one happened also to me, fixing data defects in production is a nightmare. I had a project very at the beginning of my career where we are also very popular in the media. Usually this is not where you want to end up, but it happens. At least I had the experience at the beginning of my career, and no, I don't want to have this again. But at least I can confirm we had at that time lots of trouble with data, and we had lots of task forces with armies of people in order to correct data. Because usually the data correction is hardly done automatically. Lots of manual effort is involved. And then, of course, it's also a task which has to be done by business users, because usually they are the people who have access to production. So lessons learned, do your homework before the cutover to ensure that you are avoiding this kind of nightmares. Good, that's a little bit my story and my examples. Now going a little bit to the theoretical part to give you a little bit an outlook about the data migration framework, shortly going through all the different components, and then concentrating on business data migration. What does this really mean? What components are involved? And I have also put on the slides a little time plan to give you some indications when I think data migration activities from a business point of view should start. Then we have some pitfalls and also success factors. So data migration is a process of selecting, preparing, extracting, and transforming the data so it may be transferred from one system to another. That's the theoretical definition. If you're putting this in the framework of a bigger project, then you have here in the middle the source systems, the target systems. We have different data types. We have different migration methods. All of that needs to be prepared. We need to do analysis, design, build, and test in the agile way a little bit faster. This data, I'm not so sure if really agile is working. I'm still believing there more waterfall approach is more appropriated. Then you have still on the left side something to do, on the right side something to do, and you have the verification. Overall, if you're comparing it with my analogy, I think not all my speakers are on mute. I think I can hear some people breathing. So please, Caro, Sarah, Miro, ensure that you are on mute. So overall, I would say there are lots of construction sites. Therefore, this picture, you have lots of things you have to coordinate. So as you have a big construction site where you need clear coordination, I think the same is also true for data migration. You need to have a clear concept. So therefore, let's start what different concepts we have here involved. On one side, we have migration methods. So on one side, we have source system. This might be one system. This might be also many. I once had a migration for a client in Germany where we had 1,600 source systems and roughly the same amount of target system. That's a high volume migration. But nevertheless, you have different migration methods. Either you're migrating automatically, you're migrating manually. You can have also indirect data load, so not by migrating, but if it's in the target system and then distributed. Or you might have also no data migration. And very often this is forgotten. And then later on, people are asking, yeah, but there are still this data in the source system. What should happen with them? Yeah, this might be that this data is not migrated. So going through all of them shortly. So we have the automatic data migration, which is starting with the automatic extraction. So you need to extract the data from the source system. May I remind my co-speakers to go on mute? I think there was somebody typing. Please ensure you are on mute. Okay, so we have the automatic extraction. Then it's loaded in the staging area.
I'm just jumping in here because we have Barbara and Renee. They can't hear anything. Can you maybe just, in the beginning you had that slide. Is it just Barbara and Renee that cannot hear us? I assume that's if otherwise people have been raising their hand. But Kerstin, you had this. I can hear well, says Kamalis. So it's Renee and Barbara that has issues with hearing what we're saying. I hear well. Said now, and we have the. Now we see Sarah. Hello. So to those who cannot hear us, unfortunately, we have experienced a little bit of a challenge. So try to lock out and in again, and check your browsers up to date and clear cache and cookies, and then but try to lock in again. That's what I say. The
Caro,
best
I
weapon.
hear you also 3 times. So I would suggest we are continuing with the session. The recording is then open for everybody. And even if you are not able now to hear, it might be that the recording will help you then later on. If not, you can also send me a link.
So, sorry, I tried to go on mute, but I don't find actually the way to do because I don't see my picture. How can I yes.
You click on the picture and then you should see a camera and a microphone. At least it's working for me. I cannot mute you. So I will now continue and go back to my slides. So please, my co-speaker, go on mute. And I jump to my story where I have been. First putting them. Okay. So sorry for the interruption. Good. So we are at automatic migration, where we have the automatic transform activities, the automatic load. So the data from the staging area is loaded in the target system. And then we have also automatic reconciliation. That's the D part directly from the source system to the target system. And that's usually a big discussion because it's not so easy. And I'm pretty sure in our discussion area later on, we will come back to that. I can just say, if people are telling you everything will be automatically reconciled, be very skeptical, because at the end, if we're looking on this process, that would mean they are outside the migration area and outside the extraction, transform, and load, rebuilding the same logic as the migration is using. This would mean spending the same effort on building a reconciliation tool, which is just mirroring the migration. Very difficult, but I'm pretty sure my co-speakers will have an opinion on that one. I can just highlight here, automatic reconciliation, always a challenge. So then we
Kerstin, Mio is just saying, maybe you explain a bit more about indirect load, I think.
Yeah, I'm coming to that in a minute. It's another category. So here I have the manual data entry, very easily marked as A, but of course here also extraction, transform, and load needs to happen, but all manually. So then somebody is sitting in front of the computer and entering the data manually in the target system. Also here you have B. manual data reconciliation, because as I said, on the other side, automatically reconciling, very difficult. I just give the example of address fields, which are usually not easy to compare automatically. So for sure, I have not seen any data migration where everything is done automatically. There is usually manual data reconciliation involved. And now we are coming to the indirect load. This is on my picture here. If you have an overall application landscape, you might load just a few systems within the overall application landscape. And then you are using batch processes to load data from the target system to the downstream system. This might be if you're on a migration where on Monday morning the business should open up again, then usually the migration should be finished on Sunday, something at lunchtime, and then you have a verification exercise, and then there is in the night a batch running which is loading data which needed to be loaded for the downstream system in order to work, so you can open up on Monday morning. That I would consider as indirect load. Then we're coming also to the no data migration. Here also two examples. On one side, usually if you're doing a data migration and therefore also a IT transformation, you are also rethinking your products and are decommissioning products. So of course, decommissioned products are not migrated, but you should ensure they're not in the systems anymore. And on the other side, you might also just take over systems from one application landscape to the other one. So here you don't migrate, but you might have conversions because maybe the account number or another identifier is changing, then you need to convert. But this is, I would not consider conversion as migrations. Okay, shortly going through the different data types. You have on one side base data. We can have a long discussion, what is base data? I consider it to be configuration data, reference data, any kind of metadata, which needs to be set up in the system before any migration can happen. So before you can start to migrate static data and position data. Static data might be client and access data. On position data might also be transactions. It always depends. Sometimes transactions are migrated with some core banking applications. You don't migrate open transactions. You just do selectively open transactions. Lots of discussions are also around historical data. On one migration, I have migrated historical data, and sometimes we are not migrating historical data. All of that needs to be defined in a data strategy at the beginning of the project to really define how you want to treat these different boxes. How and when you need to set up base data, how and when are you migrating static data, and how and when are you migrating position data. Good. So then let's come also to activities which are not directly technical migration related and are usually named as business activities. One very popular one is data cleansing. So everybody knows systems data, the data in the systems are sometimes not the best. The biggest topic is usually address fields. There is a logic which people follow if the system is a little bit older, but it might not be the logic you need for migration. So you need to do some data cleansing activities before the migration is happening. And even before the actual cutover is happening, also here you need to train it. So, and this you see on my slide with the timeline, my recommendation would always be start as soon as possible with data cleansing. In order to ensure that you have as clean data as possible for your migration runs. Then we are coming to the base data setup. Also here, this needs to be done before migration activities, but not in the source system, but in the target system. Here, I listed here currency, holidays, so all kind of data which is necessary for the system to work before static and position data are loaded. Good, then we're coming to data migration verification. So the field of verification is a very, very broad field, but at least the requirement is the same. You need to ensure completeness and correctness of the data at the cutover, at the final migration. So before the migration, you have migration checks like inventory list tracking, review and sign off, control sums, audit trails, all kinds of activities in order to ensure that you are not losing data. So you are going to ensure completeness of the data. Then at the migration, you have either the automatic or the manual reconciliation, which is on one side ensuring completeness. Usually automatic reconciliation are more checking that all data you extracted, you transformed, and you load, that in this value you have not lose data. And functional reconciliation is then ensuring correctness. Sometimes this is done automatically, but as I said, it's very difficult, for example, to compare address fields because sometimes they are just in different fields and very difficult to compare. And after the migration, this is also something which is sometimes forgotten. Before you go and do your cutover in your UAT, I would highly recommend that you are executing your UAT with your migrated data to ensure that the data is working with the software you are having. I have seen so many errors which could occur in the migration. You are saying, okay, the data is completed and correctly migrated, but then you're realizing, oh, the data types are maybe not the correct ones for the software to work. So therefore, always ensure if you have software tests, do them also with the migrated data to ensure that software and data are able to work together. So this is the last slide I prepared for the theoretical part. So data reconciliation, again, the reminder, technical data reconciliation is aiming for the D. So ensure completeness, partially also correctness, where I would say ensure really data correctness is more on the functional reconciliation side and then also more manual. But I'm pretty sure my speakers in the discussion will have there maybe other examples or other opinions. Usually this is a point of long discussions, how to ensure completeness and correctness of data. So now coming to business data migration. So what actually I would recommend as consider as something taken over by a dedicated project team, having a strong link to business, because usually business activities are focusing on the operational side and don't have the time and full-time focus on this kind of activities, which are including the data cleansing, the base data setup, the manual migration, the functional reconciliation, the data mapping, which also quite important, is nothing which you can do just by IT people. It always needs the business being involved to verify if the data is correctly mapped. And then, of course, the overall data management. Here I would also include defect management, which also something which is going along the project. You will always have defects which needs to be analyzed and then corrected. Putting this on a time plan, project have usually a project start and then the cutover where the implementation is taking place. I put a little bit on the timeline when data cleansing should start. And as I mentioned before, it should start right at the beginning. Of course, you need to have the data strategy where you're really listing which data should be migrated, how it should be migrated, and also you should have in the strategy the first parts of data cleansing activities identified. So after at least the data strategy is finished, you should start with your data cleansing activities. Also, data cleansing needs plan, design, execute, and test. So don't expect business just going in the system and cleanse. They will ask, okay, what do I need to do? Also here you need to have a plan, you need to design it and then execute it. The base data setup should also start shortly after the project start, because you need the base data to be set up for the first migrations and very often also for the migration team to start their implementation. And then later on, when the base data is set up and can repeatedly load it, of course, there is certain maintenance necessary. Manual migration, I would say roughly after half of the time of the project, you should start thinking also about preparing the manual migrations, where you need to involve the business in order to help you identifying in the source system and then also helping you to enter it in the target system. Data mapping is done for the automatic migration, should also start after the data strategy is finished. I would see this also quite early at the run of the project, data mapping activities to start. Usually they are quite fast with the easy mappings, but then the tricky part is usually the last 20%, which can take quite a while until the mappings are complete. Then the migration team should implement the automatic migration routine, and then migration dry runs should start. I would say half of the project timeline there, you should start your migration runs. I put on the right side some roughly time estimates, and I would always assume if you're talking about a big migration, and usually core banking migrations are considered as bigger migrations, I would assume you need 6 to 9 months of migration dry runs, where you monthly test your migration, have time to fix the defects, have time also to enter your manual migration, train them, and doing also the functional reconciliation. Of course, as I said at the beginning, I was once migrating for a big bang 1,600 out of 1,600 systems data into the source system. Of course, this kind of migrations where you have millions of records, we were testing 1.5 years and not just 2 to 9 months. So it always depends how much volume you're having and of course how complex it is. But in average, I would say for a private bank, I would consider 6 to 9 months before the cutover, you should start your migration dry runs in order to ensure that at the cutover, you have the quality required. I would also say as a rough sum, you need 7 to 10 migration dry runs necessary to get to the right data quality for your cutover. Of course, I have also the experience of 24 migration dry runs. This is just an indication. But if you, for example, have not focused very much and worked with business together on the data mappings, this might come back and then you are ending up like our project with 24 migration runs in order to show quality at the cutover. So that's all overall a little bit the theoretical part. Then let me focus some minutes on pitfalls. Of course, as I mentioned before, data cleansing not starting in time, just a few weeks before the cutover. Very difficult then to verify that the data cleansing is correct. Then nobody responsible for manual migration and data entries. Just shortly before the cutover, realized also a problem because you had no time to proper prepare. There is no data quality concept existing, assuming the data is just correctly migrated. Yeah, interesting concept. I can just confirm wonders are not happening, and data quality is a very time-consuming process and requires duration and not person days. You will always have a certain requirement for migration runs in order to correct the data. Data managed by the technical migration team. Yes, they don't have the business knowledge and don't know the business priorities. I would always recommend to have business data owners involved early in the project, taking care of the data and also being involved in the project and the verification. Then I can just say data testing starts after the software quality. If you believe you first need to ensure that the software quality is fine and then can concentrate on data testing, you will have a long duration of the project. I would say you need to concentrate on both at the same time, concentrate that the data is correct, and then also on the software quality and ensure that you are testing both at the same time to ensure that the software is able to use the data which you migrated. Very often underestimated the fixing cycles for defects. So software fixing cycles might be fast, but data fixing cycles with migration runs where you can retest it takes more time and more iterations. Yeah, indirect load forgotten is also a very famous topic. Here I can also just recommend if you do UATs, ensure that you have a full migration done before, and also ensuring that the data load is viewed and checked before you start your UAT. And then in the UAT, you will see if some systems are not working. Maybe there was an indirect load forgotten. So here I can just emphasize on that one. Data conversion, not required any testing. If you convert data, you should always ensure that you have also certain test activities in order to ensure that it's done correctly. Then the last point, this is a little bit from my introduction around nightmare of fixing data defects. Assuming workarounds can be defined for data defects in the same way as for software defects, I would highly doubt that. So at cutover, usually you have a high bulk of defects, and you're saying, okay, let's define workarounds. It's much more easy for software defects, much more complicated for data defects. Also here, I'm pretty sure my co-speaker will there have a strong opinion and can give you concrete examples. Then going to success factors, I can just recommend to have a dedicated team. Also ensure that you have effort allocated for the team. Usually I would say if you have a technical migration, which for example requires 2,000 person days, at least have half of the sum also allocated for the business data migration. Because this is also lots of effort later on to verify that the data is correct and do all the other activities we have listed. Which I can highly recommend is appoint data owners. As you have owners for processes, also ensure you have owners for data, and by that divide the overall data you're migrating through business and have data owners taking care of the data. At the beginning, the business representative might not be really understanding the concept, but if you explain them, for example, if they are responsible for the process payment, of course, they are also then responsible for the data which needs to be migrated in order to do the payments. Okay, payments might not be the perfect example for that, as there's not lots of data you migrate, but at least standing orders you migrate. So this might be, for example, something where the process owner should take care of. Then I would highlight the last point very much. Treat data migration activities as your project critical path by definition. So far, I cannot name any project I have been on where the data was not on the critical path, and therefore I can just highly recommend. The software can be built fast, I would say, and usually people concentrate on that one. But very often the data is forgotten, and then you're very, very soon on a very critical path, because data quality needs not just effort, it means also duration. So bringing me to my overall conclusion. So in order to build a solid foundation, ensure that a business team is set up to take care of all what I just have listed. And my summary would be business data migration, highly complex, very time consuming, mostly underestimated, and often the reason for project delays. Valued too late, especially data management. I have seen very often not being valued and then falling back. So what I would recommend, see data migration and especially business data migration as your critical path. It needs priority, it requires effort and time, it requires a dedicated team, and it should start as early as possible. That would be my summary. And now we're coming to the second part of our session. That's starting with, what's your story? And now I'm coming to my guest speakers, and I bring them up to the screen again. And I would be very delighted to hear what Sarah and Miro are saying to that. And maybe Sarah, you can start first. What are your experience in the area of business data migration? Sarah, you are on mute.
Yes, no, sorry. I have double muted myself. Sorry for that. On the headset and the screen. So sorry for that. So thank you very much for the introduction. And also the whole theory about data migration, I can fully confirm. I have done over 50 migrations for sure. This is already two plans, and one is just going on right now. So I really can confirm data migration is unfortunately always underestimated and not taking in consideration from the full project. I fully can confirm your final summary and speech. But the problem is always on data migration is about the chicken and the egg issue. So why should you start with a data migration when you don't know yet exactly what you want to migrate and how you want to configure, or how the business wants to define their processes and products they want to offer in the future? And that's a challenge. And therefore, then they say, okay, we have time, or we cannot start yet with the data migration nor with the data mapping. We have time, and everything we would do now, then we have to redo again. So we just wait until everything is finalized, and then we start. And that's usually the challenge we have in most of the projects. So I can confirm these points. And it's always, whatever you define, you need to have a source and you need to reconcile. And also the reconciliation point of view is always underestimated in projects. The main challenges is because reconciliation can be too details, and as you just mentioned, Kerstin, it can cost nearly the same as the whole migration itself, depending if you want to rebuild the migration in the reconciliation. So it always needs to be, here I have my suggestion, really start to define first the scope on your reconciliation and start small, maybe just with key figures, and then go more in details for the reconciliation and understand what reconciliation you want to do and what you want to prove is the reconciliation. That's the key points. So that's my just some thoughts and experience and about reconciliation and data migration. So I hand over to Mira.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Mira has a dedicated decision point of view, as he already was indicating it by body language. So Mira, the floor is yours.
No, I mean, I also agree. I was just wondering on the slides if we should have put like the fundament, not the bricks, you know, the fundament is just gray, so it wouldn't have been very nice, but you at least say it's the fundament of it, you know. And I was just wondering when Sarah said, you know, the chicken egg problem, which is correct. It's really an interesting point, chicken egg. I just wrote it down for me as well. But you remember, Sarah, whenever we sort of started to talk about parameterization or development, and you go to the customer and you do a showcase and you say, and now this is my customer Mickey Mouse or John Doe, and then you try to show the functionality, and everybody immediately focuses on the fact that they don't have a customer which is called Mickey Mouse or John Doe, and the first thing is always, these are not our customers, you know. So I made the experience like, you have to have the basis migration. You have to really have the sort of skeleton of data inside where the customer or where the bank immediately finds themselves associated to. They see, okay, this is the financial group of customers which we have. These are the assets and all the things. And this helps very much. But I also have to say, I have seldom seen a project where this worked out, because what Kerstin and you said very clearly, migration seems to be like the unsexiest job you can have in such a project. Yeah. So if my kids ask me and I say migration, they think, okay, he's a foreigner, so he migrated. Then I explain, no, I mean IT migration. And then they say, okay, I will never do your job. Okay. And then but it took me also a while when I started in the area to understand that without this, nothing will happen at all. You know, nothing will be done, in fact. And it's a very interesting thing, because yesterday I bought a new mobile phone, and you know, if you buy a new device, you migrate your data as well. There are automatic things. And then I tried to call my wife with the new mobile phone, and unfortunately it did not migrate the mobile number of my wife. So manual reconciliation, okay? And it's quite interesting. Everybody is sort of working in this and having experience with migration, because everybody has a mobile phone, other devices where they are changing regularly, but nobody is really taking this seriously into consideration when you have such a big transformation project. So it's an interesting thing. And I was also thinking about the manual migration, which you said, Kerstin, and as a technical guy, I hate manual migrations. You know, it's one of the things where you have always dependencies on others and not dependency on code. And the funny thing about manual migration is, you know, you migrate data. Migrated data is also important for the dev people, so they want to have a nice development environment where they can now work, parameterize, develop code. But then you figure out, but we have forgotten this part, because business should actually do here some manual typing, like, I don't know, some mailing instructions, some further information, some trusts have to be set up, like structures. So it's true that manual migration is needed, but it's also one of the things where I have the experience. Let's try to minimize it. Let's try to have it under control, because it's a repetitive task and nobody likes it as well. So yeah, that's these are the things which I very often see. But I think for me, when it comes to like having axioms in such a project, as Kerstin, you mentioned, so when I enter a project, and not from the beginning, but maybe in the middle stage, I always ask, can I see the mapping sheets? You know, because I can read mapping sheets. Actually, everybody can read a mapping sheet. Very often it's an Excel sheet. On the left-hand side, you have the old system. On the right-hand side, you have the new one, and you sort of see how these things are mapped. But it's quite interesting when I come to projects that the faces, when you ask for this, is like mapping sheets, but it's very trivial. Left, it's a name, and right, it's a name. Left, it's a birth date, and right, it's a birth date. Okay. And then you immediately recognize that they have not really understood what's going on, either on the core banking side, on the right-hand side of the new system, or also on the left-hand side where they're extracting data. So yeah, I sort of can confirm, basically everything. And yeah, reconciliation, rebuilding the migration, sometimes even rebuilding parts of the old functionality for the health checks. So I sometimes do also some health checks. Expensive, time-consuming, error-prone as well. You know, you introduce errors in your reconciliation as well. So you are very often busy with fixing your reconciliation, which should actually fix your migration. Not the greatest thing, but that's life. Everything what you touch, you immediately introduce some uncertainties and errors. Yeah, so it's an expensive thing, and I would as well recommend, as you said, having a dedicated team mixed of experienced technical guys, which having a thorough understanding of the target system, but having also some business people, which are really strong involved in the old in the source system, and which can actually help around the business logics in the mapping and all the stuff. So this is critical, and yeah. For me, a pitfall, as you say, is maybe the ignorance in this area, that people think, it's just shifting data from left to the right. At the end, it is, but the process of shifting is quite difficult. Yeah. And the final thing which I wrote down is, maybe we should have mentioned, or you should have mentioned in your slide, historical data. We don't love to migrate historical data, like closed customers and all the things, old documents, KYC, WPHG in Germany, everybody, you don't migrate it? Everybody's freaking out. There is always a migration as well in the archiving thing. So decommissioning also means we archive some stuff. That's also quite important, to say. And it's one of the things where you cut, where you say, no, this one goes into the archive, and this one is important for your core banking application. So
thank you,
Mio. But these are always very interesting discussions, which I very often come across. Yeah, so that's basically my experiences summarized.
Yes, and Kerstin, you just went black. Maybe just to me.
I see her. I see Kerstin. I see everybody.
Okay, then it's just to me then anyway. So, but I actually have a question to Sarah. You were saying that people were or as I understood it, that when would you say you should get on board? When is the right time to start with the migration team? When should they be starting to look at it?
I think they should start from day one, because first you need to have a concept, what you want to migrate. and also what you want to reconcile, and this you need to do on day one. And you need to get the agreement first, and how are you going to migrate with what many cycles we're going to have, what team we're going to have, and which source system we're going to use. And also have a high-level description of what you're going to do,
Caro,
what
let me
type
comment
of
on that
migration,
one as
if
well.
it's manual,
I think you
automatic, and so
can,
on.
my
At least this can be
rough
revised, of course, but
sum
you
would
need to
be
do
you
and
need
start on day
6
one.
months at the
Otherwise,
end to
you're really
test.
late.
You need
for sure.
6 months to build, and you need 6 months to design and plan the migration. So 1.5 years for overall core banking would be a rough sum of time. And that's a critical path. So therefore, you need to start with migrating and with the data activity right at the beginning. Believing the critical path is a software, I don't think so. It's your data, because this is duration and you cannot shortcut the duration. And if you are planning a core banking migration, the whole bank migration in 1 year, it's very, very tight. Then you need to be very, very fast. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know what your data mappings are. You need to ensure quality. You need to train the migrations. That's very tight. So roughly, I would say you need for a core banking migration to get then to the point where the data is accepted by the business and as from the CFO. Then it will take time. So start immediately.
Yeah, and I mean, there is no development without data. Every developer wants to do unit tests on something which he can unit test. Yeah, and
so this is also
it is important to have sort of real data. It might be anonymized, so nobody has to know the name of the of the single customers, but the real data is key. So a big discussion in development as well. You need that.
Yeah, the only workaround is to test first with synthetic data, but I fully agree. Synthetic data are as good as they are, synthetic data, but it's important is to bring in as soon as possible. But if the quality of the migration is not sufficient, then it doesn't help for the functional test. So it really needs to be planned when you split and really take over the SIT testing, unit testing from the synthetic data to the real data.
I absolutely agree, and but I mean, because if you look at the construction side, for me, it's always the fundament. You never build the windows in a house when you don't have your fundament. Okay,
but as I have
you don't call the guy with the windows and ask him how great will be the windows where I should have to place when I don't have the fundament. In cycles, I mean, we have to be careful, you know. I think, yes, they can be done agile, but it's not agile, Scrum agile necessarily. First of all, I think the team should have a critical size. It should not be too big. And this is also what Scrum says. It should have some, as you said, 6 to 9 people. Let's put it something like this. And then the other thing, what is nice about migration, and in particular, let's say core banking applications such as Avalok, you have this meta type concept. You can focus on packages, on artifacts which you want to deliver. Yeah, and I think this fits sort of the agile approach, because you can say now, oh, I want to migrate this entity, I want to migrate this entity which connects to that, and all the things. So yes, but as always, good people, discipline, and then it runs, and then agile is just the umbrella.
I would
feel.
say it's differently. You need an overall approach, a concept. You need an overall plan, but then you can deliver in cycles or in sprints as an agile approach. If you call it Scrum or if you call it whatever other method, it's very important to do that. Really to concentrate first on the big pieces, and then you have a whole shopping list anyway, or backlog, how you call it in Scrum, and then you continue on that, and this you need to map out. And it's always the question also on that, so to what detail you go at the end, and the most detailed stuff should be at the end of your development, and you should focus first on the main ones and then more in details. And then you can also rework or reshift your sprints based on your backlog, based on the feedback you have received. So I said yes and no. An overall concept is required, an overall plan is required, but then you can deliver in sprints.
Yeah, but you know what I figured out as well is very often in these sprints, or you're right, with the overall concept, I would at least, for example, like to say every week I will have a database which is, which is clean, which new data has been sort of migrated on. And I figured out in the sprints what goes very often bad is you have this agreement at the, let's say on Monday, the database should be there with the data, and then something got forgotten. And because the people are so agile, they play something in which they forgot and destroy the rest.
You have other
So this
questions,
happens
because
very
this was
often in
just my
migration. So you say, oh, I
spontaneous,
forgot,
thought.
I forgot this additional data about, this, and then you recognize, yes, now this works, but the rest went down, so it's a bit, yeah, you're right. You have to have an overall plan, but you have to be very disciplined as well about this. Yeah.
Oh, I think it was a very good one. I have a follow-up question. Have any of you tried to do it in Agile? I kind of hear a no between the lines, but just to confirm.
Where I am right now, it's sort of pseudo-agile, but agile is a word which you always have as a excuse for not being organized. So you never really know if it's just not being organized or if it's really agile.
That's
so I am. Now it's I always have the impression agile is pulled out like the last card. When somebody says, okay, you haven't delivered, then the other one says, yeah, but I'm agile, I will do it tomorrow. So this is there is a lot of misunderstanding in that perspective. But I've seen what Sarah is describing. I've seen very often, and I mean, where I'm right now, I think they are trying this, but as always, they have the most important things they have learned in Agile is you can adjust to migrate. Okay, so they are adjusting on a regular basis.
And
okay,
the CFO will never give his okay if the balance sheet is not content-wise and value-wise the same as before. So you know what the end result is. So in this sense, you cannot be agile, because agile also means you are doing lots of iterations and you don't know precisely how the end result look like. You know more or less where the value you should generate, but not how it really looks like. In what we are usually doing, we know precisely what the end result should be. The balance sheet must be the same. Not the same in the structure-wise, but value-wise, it should be the same. You don't want to lose money. And therefore, you cannot be fully agile. You can have, as Sarah said, a concept at the beginning, and then follow the concept and have iterations which are agile. I fully agree, also in the development. But what is very often forgotten, and there fully with Miro, there is no concept at the beginning. You need to have the concept at the beginning. And this is what Sarah stressed. You need to know your scope. You need to know what you want to do and how you want to do it and how you want to verify. And then you can go along. And if you don't have this concept at the beginning, it will be a tough time and it takes more time. Okay.
I have one point to add on that topic. It's very important also at the beginning to see the contracts. So depending if it's a friendly leaving of a platform or a non-friendly leaving of the platform, nevertheless, or whatever systems you have to move from one to the other, you need to ensure what support you get from these providers, what data extracts you're going to get, and when you're going to get. And that's always in the contract and needs to be negotiated. And that's key. And it also has a price tag on it. So it's important to define that in the beginning in order to know how and what options you have later on. And you will need iterations. You will need having experts from the previous system, because it's not usually explained.
Yeah, especially Sarah, I think we are thinking about when in the contract is saying you get one extract. I'm usually starting to laugh. I need not just one extract. I need
so this is
20.
one of the key points, and also project management is required to do that.
That's another discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the timeline. And the timeline also,
But it's a
when
good
you
point,
get it received
Sarah.
and what's if they delay it by the delivery. So that's
Yeah.
also some key points which needs to be considered at the beginning.
Yeah, but it's a very good point, like, because I mean the project which Kerstin was saying, when they migrated from 1,600
Caro, you have
system
the
to
last
whatever
point?
amount of systems, you always have to be nice to the people as well, because 1,600 system means that probably 1,600 people you have to be nice to, because they know all the hidden things and all the stuff. And so you're right, it's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was to follow up me on last week. We were discussing about stakeholder management, the importance of that. I guess that would also flow into here to data migration, a very important stakeholder management. So now we have talked a little about the pitfalls and the challenges. So Miro and Sarah, did you ever, maybe I'm just assuming, did you ever have like a really smooth sailing migration? And why was it smooth sailing if you had one?
Yes. If you,
Sarah?
it's key to test. It's key really to do that. And the more people you have involved, you have to try more. And I know there's a cost factor involved. You mentioned we have MDRs and DRs. MDR is usually the technical ones, and the dress rehearsal is usually one with the whole bank. The whole acceptance, the whole process has to be tested, has to be planned, and then the more you test it and more run it, the easier it becomes. And so, yes, I had some very smooth ones and I had some bumpy ones, but recently very smooth ones. But this is due to preparation, huh? And
Yeah,
this is
I
can be
agree.
done, can be achieved, and it's a routine. It's really a routine. And it's not just a data migration, it's the cool cutover and acceptance of data and so on. It's the whole orchestra which needs to fit and needs to be trained.
Yes.
So do you think clients are getting more sensitive or more educated about how important the migration is and how big it is and how much effort it takes? Do you think it's through that? You said that lately you had some smooth ones?
It depends, of course. Some of them, they do more than one. So then, of course, you get more routines. And then you know what to focus on, and you can reuse the same people. That's one thing. And the other one is that you really needed to test and to ensure them, and for it's stakeholder management, as you just mentioned, to ensure them. It's very important to train that. That's the point.
So I completely agree, but I can actually I would maybe add it's a cultural thing as well. So I grew up in Germany, so I'm happy to say that the smoothest one I had in Switzerland, and it was a friendly one and very disciplined, and it went I think it was these crucial 1.5 years, Kerstin, which you have mentioned, which was very successful, but there was this was a very good project where also the stakeholders were very open to the new software and all the things. So it was very much appreciated, the work which has been done, and there was a high trust factor, Whereas I had also a lot of bumpy ones, I have to say, in other cultural regions, where reconciliation meant the length of a particular field in a particular message, not only the value, but have you introduced a space or things like this, where it became personal somehow, they were not trusting at all. And these were the bumpy ones, I have to say. But
are very closely linked, and
I had the better experience in Switzerland. I'm sorry to say that, but
discuss
it was
how
my
a
experience.
cutover should be built up, where the data migration is the foundation. But this is not all. There's much more which is coming with cutover management than just the data migration. So at this point in time, I can just thank Sarah and Miro for their participation, and of course, Caro, for your observation of our chat. Let us now shortly close as time is nearly over. Here I shortly want to mention that, of course, Miro and me are working for OnPoint Connect. We are a small company with around 20 people working. We are based in Switzerland, but we have also offices in UK, Singapore, and Germany. We are experts in IT transformations. And our slogan is, we make your strategy work. So we are not aiming to work on your strategy, but helping you to deliver. So my next coffee talk, as I said, would be on cutover management, setting the foundation. The session is on the 3rd. The session is on the 12th of June, also from 9 to 10, and it will be the 3rd session. Afterwards, there's a 4th one planned, but I can just highly recommend cutover management. As we were talking about data migration, the next usual step is then how to prepare for cutover. So this is the end of our coffee talk. So very much thanking my speakers and Caro for participating and for the very interesting discussions we had. I'm thanking all the participants who were there. I hope you could get something out of it. And now I would end the session. This means I stop the broadcasting, and don't be surprised, but if I push the button now, everything will be blank. So thank you. Have a nice weekend, and enjoy the long weekend, at least for the ones who have the Monday off. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.